I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni viewer, and this may seem like a random topic to discuss just coming out of nowhere, but a recent conversation I had kind of got me thinking about this, and I just thought I'd put it out there to see what people think. Now, in the music scene, one particular genre has been seeing a surprising spike in popularity, and that is the genre of power metal. Power metal has been around for a while, of course, but it seems like right now it's really getting more popular than it ever has been before. It's especially surprising because power metal was one of those genres that even metal fans didn't really know what to do with. I mean, if you were already a fan of power metal, you knew exactly what to do with it. But people who were of the impression that, like, metal needs to be dark and angry and it needs to have screaming and growling and it can't sound all happy like power metal does, you were just sort of like, yeah, we are just gonna leave that over there. It's a fad. It'll go away. But not only has it not gone away, it's skyrocketed in popularity. It's even starting to find a more of a foothold over here in America. It was originally mostly over in Europe, although pretty much every band records in English, with very few exceptions. But now even those European bands are starting to branch out over into North America. So what exactly caused that? I've seen other people discuss what might have caused it, and they usually focus on stuff like the musicality of it, how it's sort of this interesting mixture of heavy metal with certain pop elements, and how certain bands have gimmicks that make them really eye-catching and just draw your eye to them visually to get you listening. Things like that. And I mean, those are probably part of it. But there are a couple of things I've noticed that I don't see anyone really talking about that I think contribute to the popularity of power metal. And I'm not looking at it from a musical standpoint, although the music is really good. It ultimately is music, so it has to be good if it's going to catch on. But I'm looking at it more from the lyrical standpoint. The first thing I think draws people to power metal these days is the idea that it is escapism. That is a very key factor. In an age where everything has become political to the point where it's just become almost inescapable. Everything has to have politics shoved into it, and if it doesn't have politics in it, then it probably should, or it'll get lambasted for not being inclusive enough or some such nonsense. Power metal comes along and just doesn't bother with any of that for the most part. I'll get to the exceptions in a moment, but most power metal bands you look at, they generally fall into a pretty standard category of we're just gonna have fun with this. They tell a lot of fantasy related stories, or they do a lot of songs that are meant to be uplifting in order to get the listener really empowered. Sometimes it's just flat out workout music, but there's never really anything in there that's telling you, vote for this person. You're a bad person if you don't believe this particular thing. Shame on you for being whatever it is that's not trendy to be these days. It's just offering a sort of escape from all of that, like entertainment can and usually should do, if you ask me. You can easily see this reflected in the aesthetics certain bands have, that which some take to call gimmicks, but I feel like that's kind of underplaying it a little. These bands don't just have gimmicks, they have concepts. You look at something like Windrose, their entire shtick is that they are Tolkiensian dwarves. And I don't mean dwarves as in little people. Like I said, they are Tolkiensian fantasy, digging underground, full bearded dwarves. And all of their songs are based around dwarven culture or fighting the forces of evil in Middle Earth and how they are as dwarves. I mean, you can't really insert modern politics into that, to be sure. Or you have something like Gloryhammer, where they have this whole rock opera concept that starts in the first album with a medieval Dungeons and Dragons style fantasy that's incredibly quirky, and then by the second album jumps into this weird futuristic Warhammer 40K style dystopia, and then by the third album we're in a different dimension with submarines flying through space and whatnot, and all the band members dress up as characters from those albums. And the whole idea, it seems, is just seeing how crazy they can make this story and still have it be coherent. Or you have the Grailknights, whose whole thing is that they are literal Saturday morning cartoon superheroes fighting the forces of evil. They're inspired by the likes of He-Man or Marvel and DC Comics and King Arthur and things like that. And they have this whole stage show built around that whole idea. Similarly, Victorius has recently adopted a sort of Power Rangers-esque aesthetic. After 3 albums where they were just a regular power metal band, now they've gone into the direction of being actual, like, soldiers fighting against evil with dinosaurs at their side. I mean, how cool can you get? I know some would say cheesy, but nuts to those people. Real cool people know that they can dress up in armor and sing songs about dinosaurs with robotic enhancements fighting aliens and space ninjas and just wear it on their sleeve. Now, I can anticipate people saying that there are going to be exceptions. In particular, I'm anticipating people saying, what about Sabaton? Sabaton seems pretty political because they write about historical warfare. Whereas every other power metal band is writing about fantasy and sci-fi and whatnot, they are actually grounded in real world history. And the thing of that is, I don't really think Sabaton is political so much as they are educational. Their passion is for history, and in particular, they use their music to highlight historical events and figures, some of which people may never have heard of in their lives before. You could go your entire life without knowing any of this stuff unless you listen to Sabaton and hear it from them first, because you wouldn't know to look it up otherwise. Not to mention that even over the course of a single album, the band's perspective on certain topics can go from one extreme to the other just between tracks. Their concept album Carolus Rex, for example, which is about the rise and fall of the Swedish Empire and the ascension, reign, and assassination of King Charles XII. On the one hand, you have a song like A Lifetime of War, which is all about the 30 Years' War from the perspective of the everyday people whose lives are affected, and how tragic it is that some people could go their entire lives knowing only warfare around them and never knowing what peace is, and just being inundated by all of this propaganda and hatred and violence every single day. But then the very next track is 1648, which is about the last battle of the 30 Years' War, I believe. And that's all about how brave these people were for standing their ground and fighting for what they believed was right, and weren't they true heroes? Later on, the title track, Carolus Rex, is about the ascension of Charles XII to the throne, and it does everything it can to paint him like a tyrant. Even if he's only just descending at a young age, everything about the song is very ominous and makes it clear that when he's in control, things aren't going to be that good. But then at the end of the album, we get the 1-2 punch of Long Live the King and Ruina Imperii. Imperia, however it's pronounced. And those songs, respectively, are about the assassination of Charles and the crumbling of the empire afterwards. And they treat that subject matter like, isn't it tragic that the king was assassinated this way and how everything crumbled when he was gone? So, like, yeah, it might seem like they're waffling, but really what they're doing is saying it's more complex than just all good or all bad. I think the simplest way to put Sabaton's perspective, at least when it comes to their music, is that they are pro-heroism, but not necessarily pro-war. When Sabaton does insert politics into their songs, it's usually something that's not too controversial. Like, they haven't really written any pro-Nazi songs because, of course, they're not going to. When they do write about the Nazis, they usually take it from the perspective of the Nazis were evil. And those of us who listen to it go, yes, I agree, the Nazis were evil. And we move on from there. Yes, it's technically political, also historical, but who's going to really argue against that? You can sort of see that across the board with a lot of power metal bands. They might have like one or two songs a piece for each band that are about a particular real world topic they feel really needs addressing, but at the same time, that's not usually their focus. Their focus is about entertainment, which is a major part of why I think they are succeeding at this point, but not necessarily the only reason. I think the other reason that power metal is really surging in popularity at this particular juncture is because there's a common theme across all the different bands, and that is about the struggle of good versus evil with good triumphing. Classic storytelling right there, you know. And I think that's speaking to people on a fundamental level. After years of hardship and divisiveness and just basically watching as evil somehow has managed to grab a stronghold in the world, and pile on top of that how so many different movies and comics and whatnot seem to be going with the morally gray approach of having soiled heroes and villains who the audience thinks is right. It's kind of refreshing to see that there's still at least one branch of entertainment that embraces the idea that there is good and there is evil, and when they clash, evil loses. And power metal really does embrace that whole idea. I already said Sabaton is very much about promoting heroism, even if that heroism is done during an act of war. But there are other bands like it as well. I mean, the ones I already mentioned. I mean, Gloryhammer is about heroes banding together as a sort of Scottish science fantasy justice league against an evil wizard. Windrose, or more recently Fellowship, are about Tolkiensian fantasy, and in Tolkien the good guys always win, even if it's a struggle. Twilight Force certainly has been seeing a surgence in popularity due to how incredibly uplifting their music is and how it's about exploring this wondrous fantasy land that they are writing about, where the dragons are these majestic beings that they release who make the world better, and how the forces of evil can never stand against how many heroes there are. Even something that goes a little bit darker, like Powerwolf, still kind of skews into the realm of heroism. Because, yeah, they're taking this weird approach of having Catholic werewolves and vampires who fight in the name of God by compromising themselves and basically becoming evil in order to fight evil, which, you know, don't go to Powerwolf for sound doctrine, but I don't think anyone actually is. And yet, what most people are drawn into is the idea that they're singing about how being a werewolf makes you a creature that can stop demons. I mean, that's not bad. Now, yes, you're occasionally going to find songs written from the perspective of the villains, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's endorsing the villains. Beast in Black, for example, on their second album, has a song called Unlimited Sin. And I know that title sounds pretty satanic, but when you read the lyrics, it's actually about how if you make a Faustian bargain, you're not really gonna come out of it that well. There's always gonna be a price, and it's not gonna work out the way you thought it would. Also, Beast in Black writes a lot about Berserk. And yes, the manga Berserk. Their lead guitarist who founded the band, huge old school anime otaku, and Berserk is his favorite. So Berserk is heroic fantasy, dark heroic fantasy, yes, but still, there's that idea of good struggling against evil. And the thing is, even after years of some of the loudest voices in the world loudly proclaiming that good and evil are just subjective ideas imposed onto a meaningless universe by humans, they have not been able to stamp out this innate feeling every human being has that knows the difference between right and wrong. That thing that's in all of us, and which is abnormal not to have. And I think that innate feeling draws people to power metal. Because, as mentioned, power metal is about fighting against evil. Even when it's tongue in cheek, even when it devotes a couple of songs to the bad guys, that is usually what it's about. And that's what people want these days. After years of being told about all the morally gray stuff and how there are no heroes anymore and how the villains have points that the heroes can't argue against, we just want stories where the good guys are good and the bad guys are bad and the good guys beat the bad guys. And Power Metal is one of the places where that is being delivered. My books are another, but they're not albums. So, in conclusion, that's the thought that I've had running through my mind recently. Power metal is a genre of music that provides an escape, but it also satisfies our desire to see good triumph over evil. And who knows, it might even inspire people to make that vision a reality. But either way, the music is still good, at least in my opinion. And while I'm sure the bubble will burst at some point, for now it just keeps expanding. And I'm happy to see it expand for as long as it can. Of course, even those might not be the only reasons, and if there are any power metal fans watching this, go ahead and tell me what draws you to your favorite power metal band, or what draws you to the genre in general. Well, thanks for hearing me out anyway. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.